started in the industry while still in high school, taking a summer job with a friend in Northern Ontario. She spent summers working at various resorts, and after graduating from Ryerson University, she started her career at the busy Sheraton Centre Hotel in downtown Toronto. Although she has spent most of her career in sales, she's also been a room attendant, waitress, kitchen helper, and front desk agent. Tiffany has worked for a number of hotel companies during her career, and she is currently the Director of Sales and Marketing at the Quality Hotel and Conference Centre in Oshawa. Tiffany is a member of the Canadian Hotel Marketing and Sales Executives Association, and for 3 years sat on their board, including a term of presidency. Currently, Tiffany is the president of the Durham Hotel Association, which represents 11 properties whose main goal is to attract and increase business into the Durham region. It is my pleasure to present Tiffany Gilmore.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. My section of this presentation is on tips on hiring and training employees that are going to really fit into your organization. First thing we need to do is develop a strategy. You might ask yourself why you need a strategy. If you've ever gone someplace where there's no strategy, you automatically know why you need one. Because no one seems to be on the same page. You get service here and not there. Airlines are kind of a good example of this lately. There's a lot of mergers going on, and employee A doesn't know what employee B is doing, and so you want to avoid that. The hiring strategy is a process which employers attract potential candidates to their organization. So whether that's using a video, whether that's using, you mentioned job fairs or things like that, it's the process in which you do that. It's a huge time saver. Now, it takes time to put it in place, to put your strategy in place, but once you do it and you follow it, it's a time saver. It will help you with customer retention and employee retention. So your customers getting good customer service will come back again and again and again. And you need to plan where you're going to find candidates. Newspaper, friend of a friend, LinkedIn, Facebook, where are you finding your candidates? Clear objectives. Clear objectives. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to find it. So, and it's different for different positions within the same organization. For instance, if I'm hiring somebody at my front desk, that is a completely different set of job skills than required for my maintenance manager. So you have to be very clear. You need detailed job descriptions or key considerations for every role. Okay, the best time to do it is when you have somebody in that role. So you figure out what they do, what they're very good at, what they need improvement at, and just sort of get a picture. Okay? Then you need to decide what skills are needed to be successful in that position. So you're not setting up people to fail. You're not going to hire somebody who is an accountant to be your salesperson, because they may or may not have that skill set. You have to make sure that you're putting the right person in the job. And decide essential skills versus desirable skills. Somebody was mentioning French. Well, is French a required skill for this position? Or is it desirable? Okay, so maybe as an operator on the telephone, French may be required. But again, does the chef need to speak English or French or Spanish? Doesn't matter. You need to decide that. You need to determine your interview process for each position. And again, it's not going to be the same for each position. So are you going to have a team panel interviews? Are you going to do second and third interviews? Are you going to do just computerized personality tests? Or are you going to just do testing? So for example, I went to work for a company one time. It was a 4-interview process for a sales manager's position. My initial interview, then I came back for a second interview. Then I had a team interview where I sat in a room with 20 people who barraged me with questions, and then I came back to meet with the general manager. When I was hired, I then did a computerized personality test. Okay, because in their mind, this was a key role of their organization and it merited that much attention. If I was going to be a room attendant or something else, maybe I didn't need all those processes. Maybe I just needed, a team interview, a first interview, and an orientation. Who knows? But you have to decide for yourself. So let's assume you've gotten lots and lots and lots and lots of resumes, and there's no way that you're going to be able to interview all these people. So what you do is you take a first pass. You eliminate those. You've already decided what your skill set is that you need, what your education component is, what your experience is for your ideal candidate. So you take your first pass and you eliminate those without the necessary skills and or education. Okay? So if they don't have what you require for them to be successful in the job, you just have to move on to the next candidate. The next point I said eliminate or flag those that have employment gaps. But really, maybe you want to flag them and not eliminate them. Because sometimes your best candidates are somebody who had to leave to look after an elderly parent, a sick child, something of that nature. What you're really looking for is somebody who maybe has been inconsistent and you want to mark on their resume, they're very qualified, but I need to talk to them about this. Okay? You want to aim for 6 to 8 candidates or less that you want to hire. If you're not sure you want to hire them, don't take them to the next step, because you're really looking for the best fit against your ideal. Is everybody with me so far? All right. So we're going to call candidates to set up interviews. Be positive and upbeat. Hey, it's Tiffany, calling you to see if you want to come for an interview. All right. Or, hi, it's Tiffany calling from the Quality Hotel. Really loved your resume. Would love to have an opportunity to meet you. When are you available to come in? Are you coming to this person who may or may not really want, do you really want to work with me? So you got to really, you have to illustrate and demonstrate what you're looking for in your candidate. There's outside service for all the steps that we've gone through so far, okay? So you really don't have to do it. There's agencies that you can hire to do it. They can do it for you, but you cannot skip the step where you decide what the skills are and what it looks like, okay? But you can hire them for the screening process. So you've hired some candidates. You're going to interview them. You're just going to interview them? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'll ask you a couple different questions. Then I'm going to go back to my office and go, oh my gosh. So what you're going to do is you're going to develop questions based on the required skills and education, okay? So, and it's the same questions for each candidate. It's not, oh, we spent a lot of time talking about her daughter who's in university, and I forgot to ask her A, B, C, or D. No, there is some rapport, absolutely, but you need to make sure you ask every applicant the same questions. You're developing a form. There's no problems if you do it that way. On each individual resume, that's where you make your notes and you identify areas that you want to speak to them further about. Okay? So you have main questions, which everybody gets asked, and then you have their resume or their applications where you ask them specific questions to determine if they're a good fit. Okay? As I mentioned earlier, not each position requires the same type of interview. So if you're doing a seasonal helper, perhaps, in beekeeping, you're not going to do maybe a 4-level interview process, If somebody is not going to have customer interaction, it's a very technical job, maybe it's a hands-on interview. Okay, so you need to determine what that's going to look like. The time needed for each interview is going to be different, and really make sure you allow time between interviews. So don't book 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3, because if 2 runs over, it doesn't leave a good impression for the people. Okay? Any questions so far? Well, I'm either really clear or it's too early. Okay, there we go. Your interview process is a reflection of the company. Okay, so when I interview you, it's a reflection of the Quality Hotel. And it's a personal reflection on me. No interruptions. No cell phones, no vibrating Blackberries, no people calling to talk to you while you're interviewing somebody, no one knocking at the door. Be hospitable. Can I get you a coffee, a tea, a water? Did you eat? Would you like? You want to make sure they're in their best position to be interviewing with you and that they're comfortable. And make sure that you give time for them to ask questions. Okay? So they need to, and they should have questions if they're a good candidate. Ask open-ended, relevant questions and take notes. You need to ask specific questions that you want the answer to for the position you're trying to fill, or positions. Some sample interview questions for you. What were your areas of responsibility at your last position? Does anyone have any idea why you'd ask this question? Okay, if I was a sales manager and an account manager and a travel supervisor versus a travel agent, like you want to be very clear that you understand the actual tasks and roles in their job regardless of the title. Okay? Especially in a market where we have people from all over the world, because a sales manager or an account manager in the Philippines could be something completely different than an account manager in Europe. Okay, so you really want to make sure you understand those tasks. Describe one of your greatest accomplishments. This is not to boost their ego, nor is the flip question to deflate them. The really important part of this question is the why. The why is about, do they have any do they understand themselves? Do they understand that they're part of a team? Do they understand, teamwork, self-awareness, that kind of thing? How have you positively influenced others to get a job done? So you want to ascertain what kind of role they played. Were they the boss and they just did it because they were the boss? Or did they have actual influence on the people to get the job done? I always get asked this question, of all the positions you've had, which one did you like the most? Probably all been asked that, right? And why? Basically, this is an indication of what they like to do. And if the role that you're looking to fill has lots of what they like to do, they'll probably be really happy, probably contribute to their retention. If the role that you have for them is a lot of what they don't mention, you may want to drill that down a little bit more to see where you might have gaps on that. Why are you leaving your current job? Chances are if they're leaving it for lack of development or shift work or anything of that nature, and you offer shift work, you may lose them as well. So you again want to drill down a little further on that. Describe a major change you made in the workplace, and they're going to tell you, and you're going to, if they haven't answered this question, you're going to say, how did you make that change? You want to understand if they were an integral part, were they just supervising the change, what was their real role? And that'll give you some leadership indicators and things like that. Okay, on the flip side to questions to ask, there's a whole set of questions you can't ask. And you can't allude to these questions at all. Go. Okay. How old are you? Obviously that's very clear, but you can't even say things like, what year did you graduate high school? What about university? You got to be really careful. Would your religion stop you from working on Sundays? You could put Fridays, you could put Saturdays. Can't ask any of those kind of questions. How much longer do you plan to work before you retire? Not a good question. Do you plan to have children or do you have children? Now, if somebody brings that up, totally different thing. but obviously I'm being very obvious with these questions, but basically nothing of a discriminatory nature. Okay? So you finish the interview process, you've reduced the list to 2 candidates. That's the ideal, 2 candidates. You're going to ask for references, and you're going to check the references. You really need to check the references. Are you going to look on Facebook? Probably. My colleague is in HR, and she says, absolutely, but you have to make sure you have the right person. And you have to decide if their public image really makes a difference to the position you're hiring. If they're not ever going to be in the public's eye, does it really matter if they went out Saturday night and whatever? You need to decide. Same with LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, as you know, is a little bit more professional, and there's that kind of thing. You're going to hire the most qualified candidate based on your applications and your interviews, and that is all going to be based on the criteria you set forward. Okay? All right, so we've hired them. Now we're going to train them. Training, very important. Complete reflection. Oh, yep.
In terms of what you just had up there, you were talking about you selecting candidates. Do you often get candidates asking you that good question afterwards for the ones who weren't? Why was I not chosen? And what kind of information are you prepared to share about why one person was chosen versus?
Yeah, most people ask. And if you've used your questions, you'll know right away. So I try to be as honest as possible without being insulting. And if there's a key element that's missing, then I'll say, you were a great candidate, you were a great interview, I'm glad I met you, but you were missing this. Or the other candidate had more of this. So you met the requirements, but they had exponentially more. It's hard though. It's hard to hear, but it's hard to ask.
In light of that, should you offer a debriefing opportunity, or do you just don't offer it, and if they ask you, then do it?
Me personally, I don't offer it, but if that's what you want to do, then absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's often been times where I didn't, not often, but you know, people have not gotten positions and nobody will tell them why. Or, you know, you've been told why and it makes no sense because there was no criteria set forward for that. So that's why you just want to make sure everything is down and you're comparing apples to apples, and then there should be no problem with saying this is specifically where you lacked.
Are you obligated to grant someone an interview?
Am I obligated?
Yes, if someone applies to your firm, are you obligated to grant someone an interview?
No. The only time that I'm obligated from my head office would be an internal candidate. And an internal candidate we interview regardless.
Yeah. Can you ask for a police check, records check?
I'm not an HR person, but I do believe you can. And I do believe you have to pay for it.
Now, does it, that's where I'm told, because I have heard that if they're applying, and that's part of the initial request, that would be part of the hiring process.
Yes.
They would pay for it, and then they would get reimbursed back on the first pay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if that's your policy, you can't just say, this is your policy for you. This is your policy across the board. And then just be really careful that if you're implementing it with a new hire, that you're consistent. Because then you get into discrimination. And why did you request it from Tiffany and not Sue? And we have the same position. You know, you have to decide initially if that is a requirement of that job. And then if it is and they get hired, maybe you reimburse. Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot here? Does the Employment Standards Act have any obligations towards the process of applications and interviews?
Well, I don't have, again, I'm not in HR, but I would think discrimination would definitely be key in there and avoiding those kind of questions. Other than that, I would really have to check, because this is not the role that I do at the hotel. So I'm not up to speed on that. Are you familiar? No.
I don't think there's an obligation if you're thinking about granting someone an interview. I don't think you have any recourse really to go back and say, well, I didn't get that job yet, I was qualified. They're not under any obligation, I don't think, to do that. I guess if you felt that there was some discrimination, and of course age all comes into that, which is interesting why you had that question. How much longer will you work before you retire? I work for the training board, so I'm thinking, okay. I wasn't aware of that particular question, yet I'm aware of all the others. So.
They can be tricky.
Yes.
You have to be, and as an employer, you have to be careful that you're not treading on those border, in that area at all.
So, because getting back to the fact that in some cases employers are getting hundreds of resumes. There is no possible way they could interview each and every one of them. So you're looking at who is the best fit and narrowing it down from there.
So we have training. Why is it important? Again, it's a complete reflection of your company, and you need to start off on the right foot. You need to identify the knowledge gaps that are missing. So you have a great candidate, great attitude, great fit to your company, but there's a few little gaps. Still the best candidate, but there's a few gaps. Maybe there's gaps in the employees you already have in position. Okay, so you need to sort of identify those areas. Key to employee development and retention. A lot of people, a lot of good employees leave because there's no future, because they're not being developed, because they don't know what's on the other side, because you haven't shared with them your hopes for them. Okay, so again, it goes back to communication. And profit. Who doesn't want that? If you're not for profit, maybe you want profit to invest in something else. Top-down culture. Walk the talk. If you're the owner, president, CEO, general manager, head honcho, whatever it is, it has to start with you. If you're not going to do it, your employees aren't going to do it. It's that simple. You have to illustrate that. And you have to develop a clear and consistent training plan for all positions. So you are going to have an orientation, perhaps, or an initial training, or maybe there's job shadowing. Sort of decide what that's going to look like. At 30 days, are you going to have a second interview with them and just say, how's everything going, that kind of thing? Are you doing that at 60 days? Maybe it's 90. Health and safety, it's key in your organization. Every employee has to go through it. When are you going to do that? What does it look like? What's the WMIS part of it? What are the correct work procedures? Okay? These days, health and safety has to be separate from, or is such an integral focus. You have some in your orientation, but you need separate health and safety meetings to really be compliant. And retraining. When are we doing that? Who's doing it? How are we doing it? Okay? I worked at one position where after you were there for 3 years, you went through orientation again. Liked it or not. You went through it again and it was all checked off and put in your file. I worked somewhere else where after 30 days, you met with the general manager. And he told you what you were doing well and he told you what you weren't doing so well. So you had an opportunity to, it wasn't a threatening, I don't want to give you the impression it was threatening, but it was just a sit-down chit-chat. You're going to track all that training as well because that is a requirement. You need to track it. Your plan has to be consistent, ongoing, and time-bound. So if you decide there's going to be 30-day training and that doesn't happen for 60 days, you don't have 30-day training, you have 60-day training. Does that make sense? You can't have 30-day training for person X and have 60-day training for person Y. So you really need to decide what it's going to look like, what the organization has the people to support. Like if it's just you, maybe you don't need 30-day training. You know, who knows, right? Have to provide feedback. So you have to be able to say, you know, Sue, I really liked what you did. It was awesome. That was great. You also have to be able to say, you know, Sue, part of what you did was really great. The other part, not as great. Okay? And there has to be consequences to it. You've all heard this before. There's verbal, there's written, you know, that kind of thing. Make sure you've documented that. And you have to empower your employees to make decisions. So you've set them up now on the training. You've done customer service training. You've done whatever it is that's required for that position. And now you have to empower them to make those decisions. So I've empowered my front desk staff, and a customer comes up and disgruntled, and they decide to give a free room. Well, I allowed them. I set them up to do that. So if that wasn't the right solution to that problem, I clearly have a training gap, right? We used to use pictures that were of chicken wings. So mild, okay, the picture of the mild chicken wings was a guest who was mildly upset, okay? And that would result in these kind of things. Then there was medium, okay? And then there was hot, and that was this. And then it was extremely hot, on fire, and that had different categories. So it can be fun, but you just need to give your employees that guideline to say, you know, this guest was really mildly upset and I gave them a free room. Maybe that didn't mesh. Maybe they just needed a breakfast. Maybe they needed $10 off their room. Depends on what the issue is. You have to expect and allow for mistakes during the first 30 days, okay, until people really get on board. Training involves everyone. And right now, first time ever, we have 4 generations in the workplace. And training, each generation is different. And you need to decide whether you're doing online training, whether you're doing one-on-one, demonstration, group training. I heard from one of my friends who said that if she wants any of her employees to do anything, she texts them. Because they're texters. It's not that they don't want to do it, this is how they communicate. So you just have to be aware of that. Doesn't make them lousy employees, it makes them different, and you're responsible to seeing to their needs.
On the previous slide, the must-haves.
Yep.
Must provide feedback, must.
Yep.
This, must that. The must comes from some sort of
Me,
legislation,
my
or is
opinion.
your must-haves?
My opinion, because
What is the point if, like, ideally you want employees who can operate without you over their shoulder, right? So if you haven't provided them the training to operate without you, what was the point, right? So it's only my opinion, you need to come full circle on that. I'll tell you what happened, actually. I was in the Bay the other day, and there was a lady, I couldn't find what I was looking for, and a lady was there, and a young lady, and she said, "Oh, I'll show you." And I was thinking, you know, this is great. She's going to actually take me to what I'm looking for. So we get there, and we're there, and it's exactly what I was looking for. I get my stuff, I'm standing at the counter, and she says to her colleague at the cash, "Yeah, they told us now we have to take people here, so I just did that." And I'm thinking, oh. So it was great, but it was like, don't tell me, you know? It was just funny. Develop short-term and long-term strategies. What is your goal for 6 months? You know, you might have employees that are great employees in your organization, you have no training plan. So maybe the 6 months is just going to be you to develop your training plan. What's your plan for a year and a half? What is that going to look like? What's your training plan, or what's your plan, what's your goal in 5 years? And you have to break down your strategies into actionable items, because nobody can eat this elephant. right? So you need to say, here's my goal, here's strategy 1, strategy 2, and these are the things I'm going to do to make sure I achieve that strategy at the top. You guys have probably all done this before. SMART plan. You've heard the word SMART? Specific, measurable, attainable. Okay. You really want to imply that. Otherwise, it's overwhelming, especially if you're a mid-sized company and you have employees already and there's no plan and you're kind of like, where do I start? You need to assess and celebrate your success. You need to assess it. How is it? I'm missing this, let me add this. It's great, let's celebrate that. Revisit, revise your plan. Make sure it's on track with your corporate goals and tie it into a performance review. That's what I would do to complete that circle. So here is, you've had your training, I've hired you, here's your training, you're empowered. Now, here's your goal. Here's your personal goals. And now, did you complete them? Yeah, I completed them. Maybe there's an incentive on that. Maybe there's a bonus on that. Maybe there's a salary increase on that. I've worked places where if you didn't obtain this performance review to a level 5, which was the highest, guess what? Your increase wasn't there. Okay? I'm not saying you have to be that severe, but maybe you want to say, you get 1% unless you've been stellar in all of these, and then you get 3%, or whatever the case is for your job or your industry. And that's it. Did anyone have any other questions?
I did, Tiffany. I should have asked where we were going along. I give feedback to clients or job seekers on the resume. So from an employer's point of view, what type of resume are you looking for? Skills-based or, say, a chronological resume?
Depends on the position.
Depends on the position?
Yeah, I gotta be honest.
Okay.
If I'm looking for somebody to do a task or certain tasks in their job, then I want to see a skills-based resume. But if I'm looking for something in a management level, I'm looking for more of an overall picture. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And what do you see as the biggest mistake when you do receive, like there are probably automatic things if maybe it's a spelling error or perhaps no clear objective. What do you see as the biggest mistake people make?
Spelling is number 1. Okay. Number 1. Because if you can't spell it, sorry. Number 2 would be you can't understand the flow. Doesn't make sense. Or it's all bunched in and it's not laid out properly. Okay, so here's my work history or whatever you're going to put here, and then here it is, and then here's my education, and here it is. So it's laid out properly, whatever that looks like. I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether employment goes first or education goes first. I don't care about that. I just want to know that I'm looking at education. I'm looking, do you know what I mean? As oftentimes I will see them, especially the ones that come over online. It's not their fault, I realize, but they come all compacted. And I don't know if I would necessarily just send that in. I would probably apply online if that's a requirement, and then I might send a resume that makes more sense. Do you know what I mean? These days we're competing with everybody. We're competing with older generations as well as the younger generations. So you want to present your best foot, right? Anybody else?
Yes. Just one of the previous slides talks about why train.
Yes.
And your bullet point profit.
Yes.
Do you have any stats on how training affects profits?
I don't, but I can give them to you because it makes sense in terms of when you train them, of course, you're making an investment into them, they're happier, that kind of stuff. But I don't have actual numbers, but I can get them for you. No worries. Anything else? Okay, so when you're doing an action plan, you want to use SMART, which is specific. So it has to be a specific goal. It has to be measurable. Okay. Attainable. What was R? Realistic, thank you. And T is? Anybody? Trackable. Timed, same thing. So instead of just saying, I want to increase business, I want to increase business by X percent or X dollars by this date, blah, blah, blah. Or I want to increase catering business, or whatever that case is. Anybody else? How am I doing, James?
You're doing beautiful.
Excellent. All right. Okay, then that's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tiffany Gilmore.